So you're telling me, and you believe that the American financial system is a complete Ponzi scheme, and that the middle class is going to be wrecked if they don't figure something out. Why do you believe that?
Yeah, I believe it with my heart of hearts. It's the American monetary system is a Ponzi scheme. Every single dollar in the system is someone else's debt. The average middle class right now has to make $150,000 a year in 2024 to be middle class. We've had a 19% cumulative inflation, and now America has more debt than it has income. So if the middle class doesn't wake up to this reality, they're going to be on one side of the coin, the working poor or the 1%.
What do you think? What do you think is going to fix that? Is it going to take a huge event, or is it incremental changes, or are we going to have something big that's going to happen to change that?
There has to be a massive shift. I mean, you think since 1913, the Federal Reserve was created, which was supposed to create money supply and balance out the job markets. The dollar's collapsed 97 to 99%. We're about ahead 100 years of that now. So the thing that has to happen is we have to create an asset-backed currency. There has to be some sort of asset-backed currency. And if you saw at the Bitcoin conference, the big thing now is we went from Bitcoin being decentralized to two presidential candidates at the Bitcoin conference and a senator saying that they're about to move Bitcoin into the treasury. So I do believe that cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, could be a solve to this. But there, like you said, there has to be a massive shift. If you have more debt than you have income, at some point there has to be a shift.
So let's talk about the cryptocurrency for just a second. If Bitcoin is not an asset, I mean, there's no backing to that either, right? I mean, is it fiat just like the American dollar? I know that it's built on a blockchain, but there's what's behind it.
Yeah, that's the interesting. The underlying technology, they say. So that we'll just talk about some aspects of Bitcoin. So 80% of the supply has not moved. So it has not moved. That's rare for an asset. There's only 20% supply left. It's a risk on, risk off asset. And now asset managers like BlackRock that told you it was a fraud used for money laundering in 2017 now say it's a flight to quality. And you have to think about that. Why all of a sudden, 5 years later, Larry Fink admitted, the largest asset manager in the world, said, hey, listen, this is a flight to quality now. Then they created what's called a Bitcoin ETF. And also Morgan Stanley just said they're now allowing their financial advisors to talk to their clients about it. Why was there all of a sudden a stark shift from Bitcoin's use for money laundering to it's a flight to quality? Well, what's happening with the American monetary system right now is we have more debt than income. So very, very wealthy people are starting to move to a flight to quality. So Bitcoin represents something that can't be printed. There's a fixed supply. Now, that's the whole dichotomy of what you're talking about. Like, what is backing this? Just like the American dollar. What's backing the American dollar? Nothing.
When we got off the gold standard in the 70s with Nixon, how big of a deal was that as compared to when the Federal Reserve was created in 13?
Wow, that was it. That was a shift. So, from 1913 to 1971, we had World War II in between that, which made the American dollar the dominant currency. We became the dominant currency. And in 1971, President Nixon came on a regular program show and detached us in August 1971, detached us from the gold standard. And they said they were protecting us from speculators. But the truth was they didn't have our gold to back our money, right? And it's interesting in this dynamic, they're saying cryptocurrencies use for speculators, right? The same conversation is happening years later. So when we detached from the gold standard in 1971, it made our currency fiat, which means fake money. So since 1971 to 2024, we've been in a low interest rate environment. We've had some blips there, a low interest rate environment and printing of money. And what it did is it completely devalued our currency. So our productivity went through the roof, but our income didn't go through the roof. And a quick example is my parents bought their house in 1973 for $25,000. Their same house is now worth $400,000. Nothing's changed with the house. It's the exact same house. That doesn't make any sense. Their income hasn't gone up that much. So we are the receivers of that low interest rate and free money environment. And it can't keep going. It's a Ponzi scheme.
We're talking today on The Root of All Success with Coach JV. He is the CEO and founder of the 3T Warrior Academy. And he's got a very interesting background and story, which we're going to dive into a little bit here to understand why he has this perspective that the American financial system is a Ponzi scheme, which are big words because people go to prison for Ponzi schemes. We've seen that happen just in the last 2 decades here in the United States. And so this is a big claim. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you may be looking at him going, what is this guy looks like a bodybuilder? What does he try? What is he teaching me about finances and Bitcoin and the financial system? What is his, where is he coming from? Well, let's dig into that a little bit. So as I understand your story, like you had kind of goes back to when you were doing bodybuilding and you had a leg injury and you ended up with a severe addiction to opiates, and that kind of gave you the opportunity to have a spiritual awakening, maybe awakening number one. Sounds like there were a couple of times in your past. So tell us a little bit about that background and how you got to where you are today as an expert in the monetary system.
Yeah, it's kind of an intro. Yeah, that's a dynamic. It's the I always call it the dichotomy. They look at me like, "What is this guy talking about?" So, December 18th, 2006, I say I committed suicide because John Boscus died, JV was born. I committed suicide due to a massive opiate addiction. I had a leg injury, took an opiate, insecure little boy, hadn't dealt with my childhood trauma, and the opiate. Many people have ever experienced an opiate addict. It gave me confidence. It really did, and that leg injury turned into taking 2 opiates a day. 5 opiates a day, 20 opiates a day, buying it on the black market to a full-blown opiate addict, destroyed my business, was a horrible father, admittedly a horrible father. And I decided to take my life on December 18th, 2006, took a massive amount of opiates, and thank God I made it. But the interesting thing about this is that I had never been taught spirituality, been taught about God. I thought Christmas was Santa Claus and Easter was Easter Bunny. And I prayed for some reason, knelt down and prayed right before my attempted or committed suicide. And I woke up to a phone call from my mom. She woke me up from the self-induced coma 48 hours later. And she said, I don't know what the F is going on with you, but you need to read a book called The Secret. And I read a book called The Secret. I don't think I was ready for the Bible or spirituality at that point, but The Secret at least allowed me at a very low level to understand that my thoughts had created that reality. And that's how the whole journey started, was 17 years ago, thoughts become things.
Wow. Well, it's interesting that that your spiritual journey, started with the book The Secret, and then morphed into Bible, and eventually Christ. Christ is part of your story, which we can talk a little bit about now. I've been a follower of Jesus my whole life. When The Secret came out in 2007, which is about the time that's all happened to you, and your mom was telling you to read this book, when it came out, I thought it was blasphemy. I thought it was terrible. It didn't fit with my religious perspective. I thought it was more name it, claim it, this woo-woo stuff. It wasn't until about 2.5 years ago, that I finally read it. And it set me out on this journey of understanding how thoughts become things, what I think about, I bring about, that everything is vibrating, what the law of attraction is. Although The Secret is really surface level of all that stuff, but it really kind of opened me up. And I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Dr. John Demartini, who was in The Secret, on my show. He's a fascinating guy. I had a really great conversation. So from The Secret and coming out of a self-induced coma that you were hoping, originally would kill you. Maybe you weren't. Maybe you really didn't want to kill yourself. Maybe you just were screaming for help.
Yes.
But what happened next? I mean, you went from this bodybuilder to a guy now that's teaching people about finance. How did that journey influence your change?
Yeah, what a weird transition, right? So I was doing The Secret, and this is it's going to be a kind of a funny story. So I was following The Secret, doing the I Am Affirmation vision. I mean, maybe I had an advantage. I mean, I was at rock bottom, getting evicted from my apartment, had lost my business, recovering addict, and I met this mentor, and he was kind of mentoring me, and he started teaching me more about abundance and Bob Proctor, and I started getting into all that stuff. And I was doing the I Am Affirmations, and then all of a sudden there were some odd jobs that I just needed a job. And the ironic thing is I have severe dyslexia, so I struggled through education and being a student. And I get this call from that mentor, and he says, "Hey, listen, man, I have a job for you." I'm like, "Yes, I just need a job, please." And he said, it's at a bank. And so I said, okay. So I went and got a suit at the Goodwill, the thrift store, 50%. I kept it in my box. I still have the suit, put an oversized suit. I get there and I sit with this lady. Her name is Lori Schmidt. I get emotional talking about it because it's like, just because she gave me the opportunity is why I'm here. So I was sitting in front of Lori Schmidt, and I'm like, we did this interview and I was using all my manifestation techniques, the woo-woo stuff. And I'm like, and I said to her at the end, I said, "If you give me this job, I promise I will be the best employee you've ever had." And I just walked out. And I'm like, there's no way. It was for a banker. And I'm like, this makes no sense. So I'm driving away, and she calls me 15 minutes later, and she said something pretty interesting, which I understand 17 years later now. And she said, "We're going to hire you as a banker." And I'm like, what? I thought it was gonna be like janitor or something. And she said, "We liked your energy. We can train you to be a banker. And I was like, yes, I'll take it. And that's how my journey started. I started out as a banker, went through banker training, and I applied all the secret, the manifestation. I started to understand Christ and consciousness and understanding how powerful, prayer is. And I just got really disciplined and consistent. I moved up really fast in the banking system. I ended up going to CBA Executive Banking School. And ironically, that school is what started this awakening for me to leave.
So, ironically, you got your start in banking, and I would think now that you're probably a guy that's standing on the corners going, "Banks are lying to you. They're doing bad things to the world." Like, so how did that transition happen?
Yeah, I wouldn't say. Yeah, and again, I'm not the guy that's like banks are lying to you. Banks are horrible. Banks are very honest and open. What they do is they're not a nonprofit organization, right? It's not that they're lying to us. It's that they created a model that we should understand for ourselves, right? And we're not teaching people financial literacy. So when I became an executive banker, went to CBA Executive Banking School, I learned how to scale banks from the ground up. And the key is to get as many deposits as possible for us to leverage your hard-earned money to make interest income, fee income, and capital markets income. Well, I noticed that we're constantly getting people buried in debt, getting them payday loans, all these things that made us more money, but we weren't truly financially educated. And our bank was going through a massive scandal. And I started to speak up about it, and I ended up in fake news. And I was like, interesting. So because I'm speaking up about what I know, I ended up in a fake article. And there was facts, figures, numbers, logic that was not true, confirmed through HR. And I was like, I said, so what are we gonna do? They said, we just have to let it ride. They're gonna post it. I'm like, this is not okay. So I started to speak my truth while I was in banking. I started going through this massive awakening. And it was like, this is not okay. You can't just take somebody and manipulate them to stay quiet. And so I just decided I hung out for quite a while. And then in 2017, I started getting this like, well, now I know it's the spirit, the spirit. It was this feeling of I have to leave. But now think about it, suicide to VP at a bank, got the 15,000 square foot lot home, the big casita, all the stuff that you're supposed to have, right? Like the American dream. And I was effing miserable every day I drove because I wasn't fulfilling a purpose. And I walked out in 2017. And I didn't really, to be honest with you, 7 years later, I didn't know I was going to be teaching all of this right now. I followed the Holy Spirit. I know that may sound woo-woo to people, but I did. Is I've been guided by the Holy Spirit. But through that process, I lost everything twice. Getting to where I was at, it's because I left, and it was like it was almost forcing me to make me think I made the wrong decision. But I kept following the Spirit. I kept following that guide, and now here we are. 7 years later, we've helped over 8,000 people worldwide. We have 2.2 million friends. I call it friends on social media, and to me, that means I'm in alignment with my truth and what I'm supposed to be doing.
So when you lost everything twice, walk me through what happened.
Yeah. So the first time is, I thought since I was successful as an executive, I'm like, I wrote a book. I was like, I'm going to write a story about my life. I'm going to write the success book. I launched my podcast, and I thought that entrepreneurship. I was an entrepreneur before, but I was not ready to be an entrepreneur. So this was my true first entrepreneurship journey. So I build a program online. I'm seeing everybody making all this money online, and I'm going to be a successful speaker. And I launched my podcast and my book and my program in 2018, and 0 people signed up. I couldn't even get, I couldn't get family members to buy my book. I was like, wow. So here I am now. The benefit was I had a really nice 401k. I had a bunch of money in my bank account, considering where I was at as an executive, and it dried up very fast because I kept investing in coaching. I kept investing in the business, and the bank account dried up. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if this is going to work out, but I kept pushing forward. I kept posting. 2017 to 2020, I posted every single day, almost 17 times a day. I never stopped. I kept doing stories, but what shifted for me, so I lost everything building the business, investing in my 401k, and then we finally get it going. We finally get it going, Jason. And then all of a sudden in 2020, I went through Alex Hormozy's program, and we finally scaled our facility. We were kicking ass, and then the pandemic hits, and they shut our business down because we're a gym. And I'm like, that was the trigger, Jason, that changed everything for me. Cause I was like, okay, wait a minute. Somebody can walk in and just lock my doors and mess with my ability to feed my kids and my family. I'm like, this will never, ever happen again. So I humbled myself. I moved back in with my parents. I didn't touch my crypto portfolio because I knew where it was going to be at. And we're going through it right now. I held it. I humbled myself, went to my parents. So imagine what my parents are thinking. I'm 43. I leave an executive job 3 years earlier. I'm knocking on my parents' door. Like my dad's like, I told you so. And I'm like, just give me a year. So I lived in their home and I got my shit together. So that's where my journey started of understanding how the system actually works and how the wealthy operate. And so from there to now, my life is completely different.
So so you left banking to, so I'm confused a little bit. So you left banking and then went into the gym business, not finance, talking about
Right.
finance.
Yeah.
You went into the gym business.
I had no thought of talking about finances, none at all. So what triggered it was that my passion was studying macro and microeconomics and the economy, right? And then I started what's called the 3T Warrior Academy, which is still the academy. It just has evolved and added new things to it, like financial literacy. We taught people fitness, mindset, getting your shit together mentally, goal setting, vision creation, a lot of secret type stuff, vision creation, success planning, all those types of things. But what happened was in 2020, when they shut me down, I'm like, what is this system all about? Like, what is this? Like, how did they take my ability to feed my family? But there's these wealthy people that are they're fine, right? And so I started diving into, so I went to a place that's free mentorship, the library. And I started reading every book I could. Now I understood banking. I understood the banking, but it's very different from how the wealthy operate. We weren't teaching people how to become the 1%. We were teaching them how to feed the 1%'s bank accounts, right? And so I started studying Cash Flow Quadrant, Richest Man in Babylon, Think and Grow Rich, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. And I started to understand there's a quantum energy to money. It has to keep moving. It needs to be current. And so I started doing it myself. And then I started to talk about the things that I was learning on YouTube, and it exploded. And then we went on the TikTok is actually where it exploded. I started to talk about the truth that I was experiencing. So just from what I was learning, and then people started to feel that, and then it went completely viral. And now I've been teaching people since 2020. All I'm doing is I'm figuring something out, coming back and teaching what I'm doing. That's it. Only speaking from my paradigm.
Let's take a quick break to thank our amazing sponsors for making this podcast possible.
As an entrepreneur running multiple businesses, effective communication is critical for me. I've tried all kinds of outreach tools over the years, but none have compared to Dubb when it comes to driving real results, and that's DUBB. I was one of Dubb's first users. I think it was like 7 years ago when they first launched, and I've been a loyal customer ever since. Dubb has completely transformed my prospecting, my client communication strategy, and here's why. Dubb makes it simple to record personal video messages and share them across email, SMS, social media, and more. And this brings back the face-to-face connection that's missing from most digital outreach. And what happens is my prospects instantly feel more engaged when they can put my face to my name. I end up building a stronger relationship faster by incorporating these video messaging into my workflow. Dubb also provides tracking and analytics so I can see exactly who engages with my videos and how they respond to them. Their automation and their CRM features help me nurture leads and close more deals. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, right, as entrepreneurs. So after using Dubb for years, I absolutely can't recommend them enough. I mean, Ruben, those guys over there are phenomenal. I love Darius. They're all great guys. It's become an invaluable tool that I depend upon to run my businesses efficiently. And if you want to boost your outreach and see amazing results like I have, head over to therealjasonduncan.com/Dubb. That's DUBB, and you can try it completely for free. No credit card required. You get the first 50% off your first 2 months, by the way, if you use my link. You need to take your prospecting to the next level with video messaging from Dubb. They're my go-to sales communication platform for nearly 7 years and counting. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/Dubb. Try it for free, no credit card required, and you'll get 50% off your first 2 months as well. Owning a business means spending a lot of time thinking about money. Do you have enough cash to pay your vendors, cover payroll, keep anything for yourself? What's the solution? Banking with Relay to gain total cash flow clarity. With up to 20 checking accounts, you can separate cash for every expense, payroll, taxes, owner's comp, and you can know exactly how much you have to spend. You can get banking built for small businesses. Sign up in 10 minutes at therealjasonduncan.com/relay. That's therealjasonduncan.com/relay. Relay is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided by Thread Bank, member FDIC.
Thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
So you came out of the banking world having this desire to talk about or to learn about micro and macroeconomic theory and reality, but you did a gym because that's what you enjoyed.
Yep.
And so you're doing the gym, but at 43, you lose everything in 2020 because they shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
I still can't believe we allowed the government to do this to us.
It was weird. Like, I had an experience. I was leaving my parents' house. Like, I was still coming to train people, like, privately. I was driving down, and a sheriff pulled me over. This is when they had curfews. He said, "Where are you heading?" And I'm like, "To my facility." So, "What do you run?" I said, "A gym." He's like, "You have to go. There's a curfew." There was a curfew. I was like a little kid, man. I'm like, "You're serious?" And it really triggered me. And I'm like, okay, I will never have my family in this position again. And so I started to study people like Warren Buffett, Ray Dalio, the true wealthy, right? And where Warren Buffett says, if you can't make money while you sleep, you'll work until you die. And then I started to study how deeply, since the 1900s, they've indoctrinated Americans to trade time for money. So much time we can't pay attention. And now where we're at, Jason, it's like the average American has to make $150,000 a year to be middle class. They don't even have enough time to stop and pull themselves above water right now. Like, this is such a critical time. And that's what I've been showing people. Instead of being like, here's what I read, here's what I did. I applied it, saw success with it, and now I'm teaching it. I'm like, here's what I did. So I just keep going forward, building safety, coming back and teaching. And I think that's what I would like to see in banking, speaking from your paradigm versus what the bank wants you to sell for commission, if that makes sense.
So we've got an issue, as we started off the top of the show, that, the American financial system is a Ponzi scheme because we've got fake money. We're being taxed at an extraordinarily high rate, regardless of how it appears worldwide comparison. It's still an extraordinarily high rate. And if you don't know, what we're talking about, just go try to earn some money and build a business. You'll see what we're talking about.
Intense.
We're taxed at an extraordinarily high rate, yet we know that, I don't know what the stat is, you probably know the stat, but like there 80 something % of our currency that is available to us now in circulation was created out of thin air in the last 3 years.
Yes.
Well, if they can print money when they need money, why do they require me to pay taxes unless they just simply want to control me?
Yes. Yeah. Let's dive into the numbers there. I mean, what you said is so powerful. Like, hopefully people we'll go research this. Okay. So up until 2000, they got us. So we were in 8 trillion in debt the past 223 years up into 2000. From 2020 to 23 trillion in 3 years. Like, think about that for just a moment. There is no money in the system at all. Like, there is not any money in the system. You said it. We're the only country that can print money. So that causes a problem for the whole world. The whole world right now. So almost all debt is denominated in American dollars. Most of our debt is held outside the United States by China and Japan, right? And our taxes are going to pay the interest on our debt. Like, so something has to switch. Like, people can go back and forth, economists and stuff, but you can't continue the Ponzi scheme. You can turn the printing machine on, which today I think they're turning it back on. They're starting quantitative easing. And also they're going to, you nailed it. All they do is print. They create debt and they monetize debt. That's it. So knowing that as middle class or working to get up to middle class or to the wealthy is you have to understand how debt works in the system, right? What most people do as Americans, we buy things that make the wealthy wealthier. The Americans buy things that we use as our commodities or the things that we rent or so that's something that I started teaching people on how I use these capital markets, knowing too, like, I think cryptocurrency is extremely speculative and you got to be very careful as well too.
Well, your theory of economics, are you more Austrian economics guy?
I'm not too familiar with that, honestly.
Yeah. So the Austrian economics is something I stumbled on a few years ago. You being who you are, I think you would find it very, very fascinating. But, in economic theory, the United States, as far as I understand it, and I'm no expert, I'm not an economist, but as I understand it, we subscribe to something called Keynesian economic theory, which is what we lower the interest rate when this needs to happen. We raise the interest rate. It's like we're controlling it with these buttons and strings that are not attached to reality. where Austrian economic theory is more about supply and demand. It's purely capitalistic. It's like, hey, if something needs to happen, we let the market correct itself. We don't go in and screw around with it. But there's a podcast I like to listen to called the Laura Murphy Report, LARA-Murphy. Robert Murphy and Carlos Lara that do it. They were the ones that taught me about this, and they're really big into the infinite banking concept as part of the way to help control your own personal wealth. And anyway, just as an aside, I think you would find it very fascinating being an economist as you are.
Yep.
But I'm going to go back to a question I asked earlier, Coach JV, because what's it going to take? I mean, we're down the barrel of and this is not hyperbole. And I've never said this publicly, but I think we're facing the most pivotal election in the history of our country because of what's at stake. I don't like where we are, and I don't like our choices. But where we are, this is a big, huge choice. Massive. And the choice that we make on the next president is going to have a lot to do with our economic and perhaps social well-being. I mean, we look at what happened in the last 4 years. Our world's a very different place than it was 4 or 5, 6 years ago. But the question I asked earlier was, what's it going to take to get everything shifted? Where your mom and dad's house, it was 25 grand, 400 grand now, where we go back to normalcy. Is it World War III? Is it a complete meltdown? What is it going to take to get back to normal?
Yeah, you nailed it. Unfortunately, it's going to take the middle class getting like, if you want it to get back to normal and normal economics, the middle class is going to get wrecked. Because think about this. People own $1 million homes. They have $150,000 boats. They have $40,000 trucks, and they make $60,000 a year. It doesn't make any sense. What happened was, because of cheap money, low interest rates, we got to over leverage ourselves so much. So there's going to have to be an adjustment. That's what needs to happen, is we have to go back into a normal economy. And you said it, an even playing field, right? And this is what I believe is going to happen, is that cryptocurrency is going to come in here. It's a new monetary system. The shift has to happen, right? So there's going to be a shift into an even playing field. America is not going to lose its dominance, but the dominance is going to change a little bit. I believe there's going to be a bag of currencies. It's going to be regulated across a bag of currencies versus one dominant currency. There's going to be an even playing field, a fair marketplace. Like you said, it's like, do you have your shit together or not? Or do you run a good business or not? It's not going to be one control mechanism, because the border of finances is dropping. Like, think about it. America could do this because we had the SWIFT system. You could have one currency that dominated, but now the advent of Bitcoin is decentralized. Like, I can transact with you without an intermediary, and that changes everything. And they know that we can actually create our own banking system. We can create our own transactions together. So that's why they're now wanting to move it underneath the treasury. So what I believe is going to happen is they're going to take Bitcoin, they're going to move it underneath the treasury to shrink the balance sheet. And that's going to help us get out of our national debt. And from there, they're going to create an asset-backed currency, whether it's gold, whether it's silver, whether it's Bitcoin. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grow our way out of this economy through infrastructure, a new financial system, roads, airports, and all that stuff. They need to privatize airports, things like that. And that's how we're going to have to grow our way out of the economy, which is going to be great in the next couple of years for people in the economy. But right now, I think there's going to have to be an adjustment. People are going to have to get to a position where it's a real economy. Like, you can really afford what you have.
Do you believe that the reason that the feds are embracing Bitcoin more than cryptocurrency in general, but Bitcoin specifically, because they realize that if they don't, they can't tax it?
Yeah, I don't know if the feds have realized it yet, but I think that Trump it became a presidential. This is so ironic. I was just talking about this on my channel this morning. It's like, how ironic is that? Bitcoin is created as this. Okay, we need to talk about this part. So 2009, Bitcoin is created. Also, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa created BRICS in 2009. So this group of countries came together to de-dollarize. They say we are de-dollarizing. That is our goal. But at the same time, the same year, Bitcoin was created, after our biggest financial collapse in America, because all these countries are looking at us and be like, who's regulating these banks? Like, these guys are sloppy. They're literally dominating my currency, but they're not even regulating their bankers. So Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa came together to de-dollarize. And they rightfully are saying they're working to de-dollarize right now, right? They're creating their own digital currencies. Russia went from 70% of using US dollars because of our sanctions down to 20%. And it's rumored that they're down to 0%. They're using the yuan now. They're creating their own central bank. And then all of a sudden, Bitcoin, this thing that was fraudulent, that Jamie Dimon told you it's used for money laundering. Larry Fink said it was used for money laundering. Now BlackRock says it's a flight to safety. The last Bitcoin conference, President Trump was there, RFK was there, Senator Loomis was there, and now they're like, we want to bring Bitcoin into the treasury. Like something's happening here that people need to wake up to. I think that I just would encourage people just to look into this narrative, right? Just to maybe think, hey, listen, if the government now is saying Bitcoin, I don't think the feds are about Bitcoin because it unless they pull it up underneath the system, they're not going to be able to tax it, right? They're not going to be able to run it. But I think what's going to happen is they're going to pull it underneath the centralized system. The only time they'll legalize it, or not legalize it, provide the proper regulation, which we're almost to, is when they can profit off of it. And we're almost there. So,
well, I think anything the government touches, I think they have probably a 90% chance of screwing it up. Very few things that they've been able to improve our lives with. And that is not to say that the infrastructure that has been created is not helpful for a safer and better, more productive society.
Yeah.
I mean, there are things that the government needs to be doing, but I'm a small government guy. I think that we need to get as much the government out of this as much as possible. We need to open up to free market capitalism to let people decide what they want, how much they're willing to pay.
Yeah.
And I'm not a crypto guy personally. I could, primarily because I don't understand it. It's not because I don't like it. It's just primarily because I don't understand. Do I own some? Yeah, I've got some. My funny story with crypto is I had an off-market crypto gifted to me several years ago that was worth, at the time, maybe 10,000 US.
Yeah.
And today it's worth, millions, but I can't do anything with it. Like it's not I can't figure out what to do with it because it's such it's an off brand.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not really attached to anything, but dude, if I could figure it out, I'd have a few $1 million, but I can't figure it out.
What's interesting too, I want to make very clear as well. So cryptocurrency is a part of you brought up infinity banking concept. I just want to encourage people, like, it's very, very speculative. You have to have a very strict game plan. We're still in the speculative phase, right? So I use what's called the risk pyramid. You brought up infinity banking. I use insurance. So I'm diversified heavily out of crypto. So what I did is 2020 to 2022, I pulled profits as everybody's trying to get rich. I pulled profits. I use insurance. I use infinity banking concepts. So I use IUL policies. I max funded my policies. I created more businesses. I created more cash flow. I bought silver, and then I'm using Bitcoin as my gold. And now we're going to use the next bull run to pull it down, max fund more insurance policies, borrow against ourselves to get multifamily real estate. So I'm super into diversification. Like I don't want people to think that it's just about crypto. Crypto is a great opportunity. I hate to say this. I don't like the get rich quick, but to make a large amount of money in a short amount of time. But most people get wrecked in crypto because they don't have a game plan and they don't have an exit plan.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that, these next few months, what we deal with is not going to lead us to another catastrophic event, but that's just my personal, what I don't want personally. Yeah. But also I look at our system and what we're dealing with and how nutty the world is, not just financially, but socially. Just our morals and ethics seem to be degrading at a rapid pace. Yeah. I don't understand why we're here, but I just want it to fix. I want it to quit. This is insane. I mean, we're watching stupid things in the Olympics where men are beating up women. And I just like, what have we done? What have we, and it's all tied in. I know that in your economic studies, this macro and micro, like things that aren't attached to money affect the money.
Oh, 100%.
Like we got to figure this crap out.
Yeah. It's it's a massive cycle. It's like when Jesus came back on a donkey, right? Donkey represents humility. He was humbled. He left for 18 years. What's the first thing he did? He went into the synagogues and said, "You made my place a den of thieves." He flipped over the money changers. This is a cycle in humanity that keeps happening over and over and over again. We get too good of a good thing. We get sloppy, and then God wins 100% of the time, 100% of the time. And then energetically, frequency wise, we get a little reset. Like we're going to get reset. Like, so I'm telling people in my corner, I'm like, you got to get your shit together right now, man. Like it's whatever you want to call it. If you think Christ is coming down on a horse in the sky, but I think Christ has always been with me, is always here and is coming. But I mean that in a spiritual sense. Like it is the greatest time in human history to develop a relationship with God, with Christ, whatever you believe in. I'm not trying to get people to believe. I believe in Christ and God. And that's my foundation. That's where all my discernment comes from. That's where all my decisions come from. And when I say that, I think it offends people, but I'm like, I make my decisions based on spiritual guidance. And I'm very serious about that. Like I make my financial decisions, my family decisions, all based on spiritual guidance. And that's how I went from the secret to Christ being my guide. And it's a totally different way to operate your life.
I love it, man. Well, I think that people probably should take a look at you. You can go follow Coach JV on Instagram. It's Coach JV underscore on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Any of those platforms, Coach JV underscore. And then if on YouTube, it's 3T Warrior Academy, 3T Warrior Academy. Check him out. And if you're interested in this economic concepts and what's going on and understand how all this pulls together, Coach JV is your guy. You should probably talk to him. I think I've been enlightened, and I think there's more to learn here. Let me ask you these questions as we finish up today, Coach. What is your one key to all the success that you've been able to accomplish? What's the one key that helped you unlock it?
Grit and discipline. That's it. Grit and discipline. It's having grit to get through the hard times and the discipline to keep going.
And how do you personally define that word success? What does that mean to you?
Success means freedom to me. Freedom to be in the position I'm in right now. I'm homeschooling my son. I get to be with my kids and have dinner with them every single night, being with family, friends, and being an impact to all the people I come in contact with, a positive impact. It's freedom. It's freedom of choice, freedom of time. That's what success represents to me.
And by that definition, do you consider yourself successful?
Very successful, man. The richest man in the world.
I love the confidence of that, man. So, let's put your coaching hat on for just a second and speak to the audience and give them the best piece of advice that you have for them today. What do they need to know today?
Yeah, I'll give you a 5P framework that we teach. First is financial literacy. The number one thing that all Americans do and need to do worldwide is you need to understand what money is. Just simply teach yourself and your kids what money is. Once you understand what money is, it'll wake you up to the reality of what we're experiencing. So financial literacy is number one. Number two is develop financial discipline. That's looking at your debts and non-negotiables. Get rid of all debts. Like if you have 2 cars, you go down to 1, right? So debts and non-negotiable. Non-negotiables are the things you need: food, shelter. Once you lower your debts and you look at your non-negotiables, you create some cash flow. Once you create cash flow, number 3 is you need to learn how to earn. We need to take sovereignty of our wealth. Just don't walk into an HR manager and be like, here's my money for my 401k, and hope that the market's favorable when you retire. You need to start understanding the capital markets. How do you invest? That's your hard-earned money. So number 3 is learn how to earn. Number 4 is once you learn how to earn, pull profits and learn how to protect. And number 5 is learn how to protect and grow that money for the next generation. So the financial literacy and financial discipline is the most important part right now, is understanding what is actually happening and follow the money, and you'll see where the decisions are going to be made. That's all you have to do. That's all I'll say about that. If you follow the money, you'll see where they're taking us.
Follow the money. And I know you've probably read it, but The Creature from Jekyll Island,
Changed my life.
People need to go check that out, because if you want to know what happened in 1913 when the Federal Reserve was created, that'll give you a really good insight to what's happening, and it will absolutely make you sick to your stomach to understand that stuff is still going on to this day, but it is the reality that we're living in. And we're grateful for people like you, Coach JV, who are still the beacon to shine the light on this, the ugly, dark side of what's going on in our financial monetary system here in the United States, because it is a Ponzi scheme and we're living on borrowed time. And no pun intended, because they borrowed $36 trillion. There's no way to pay that back. No. And it's all going to come crumbling. But as you say on your website, you've said several times a day, it's time to get your shit together.
That's right. Warriors rise. Love it.
Well, thanks for being here, Coach JV. I really, really, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And congratulations on your success. And I wish you continued success in your journey to let everybody know what the truth is about our financials.
That's right. God bless you, man. Thank you.
Well, there you have it, another successful entrepreneur. This time we got a little bit more deep into the expertise of our guests, diving into money, financial policy, what's going on. And so what I hear from him is this deep heart of trying to help you and me understand our part of this. It's not just somebody's raising an alarm, somebody who's just blowing a whistle on something. It's coming from a place of service. And that's what I appreciate about Coach JV, is that he really wants you to understand this. So again, go check him out at 3twarrior.com or on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at Coach JV_, or on YouTube at 3T Warrior Academy. Big shout out and thanks to him and his team for coming on the show today. It's been a pleasure to have him be a guest on the Root of All Success. If you aren't yet subscribed or haven't left a review, man, it would mean the world to me if you'd take that 5 minutes and just do me a solid and go leave that review and say, hey, this is a great show. You should listen to it. Puts me in front of more people so I can get on higher level guests just like Coach JV. But make sure you tune in again next time when I talk to another very successful entrepreneur about his or her journey to success. As always, I am the real Jason Duncan. Make sure you listen to the guy at the end of the show. He's going to tell you a little bit about things you need to do. And as I finish every show, Jesus is King.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.